Hey coders, I'm here to take you through how to integrate the Mailgun API into your own Node Express servers. It's actually fairly simple, and the cool thing about integrating third-party APIs is that once you do one of them, they pretty much all follow the same kind of pattern. You typically have to go sign up for their service on their website. You get typically like a test key or some kind of developer's key that you can use to play with, and then typically you have to pay for access for the full features that it might offer. That might not always be the case, but for Mailgun, it happens to be. And after that, they typically have some kind of connecting software with documentation that you just kind of scroll through, find out what you need, and then integrate it as best you can into your code. I'm going to take you through the process of doing this with Mailgun. So all you'd have to do is head to mailgun.com and sign up for a new account. I believe they required your credit card at one time to have on file. However, you will not be charged unless you get a published API key that is used for your production project. If you are just as a developer and you have a test sandbox key with a sandbox domain, then you do not have to worry about getting charged. It's just a security feature that Mailgun has to integrate in order to prevent spammers from signing up for their service and using their API to send a bunch of spam emails to our poor little inboxes. So these guys have to take these things into consideration, and we kind of have to jump through these hoops as developers to make sure we get this up and running. After you sign up and go through the verification process, you should be landing on a page that probably looks similar to this. You will have a list of what are called domains that give you an API key and a domain to connect to. And I'll have to definitely re-roll this after the video and make sure nobody lifts this particular key and tries to troll me. So clicking on the sandbox domain itself, that's the domain that you're going to want and need to integrate to their third-party API in your Node Express project. And you're going to have an API key right here as well that you're going to want to have on hand so you can connect it in your Node project. I don't think this is required anymore as an authorized recipient. So when you are in sandbox mode, like as a developer and testing and playing around with their service, you have to authorize recipients to receive emails from your code. By default, I believe they have it set up to where your email address that you sign up with is actually already considered an authorized recipient. If you're having any kind of issues or you just want to play it safe like I did, you can click on this Manage Authorized Recipients button and go ahead and go through the verification process with your own personal email address or some kind of testing email address you might have to play with. So going back to our domain page here, we're going to go ahead and scroll back to the top and check out this documentation link. I'm going to open it in a new tab and check out what we got going on here. Any third-party API worth its salt typically has very solid documentation that you can use to figure out what you need. As you can see, they have various examples in many different frameworks and languages that we can try and use. And obviously, we're going to be clicking on Node.js here. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on this quick start guide and click on sending email because that's what we want to do with our code. And like any good developer, ignore half of it until I find something I want. So what we want here is this example. What they do in their code, I'm not sure how I just managed that scroll bar to pop in here. Okay, but what we need to do is essentially import Mailgun. We need to have our API and our domain key handy. It looks like we can configure the Mailgun import with a method that takes an object with the API key and the domain as their arguments. Looks like we need to set up some kind of data object for our email. Once we're configured with Mailgun, we have this messages method on it, and that messages method has a send that takes the data and has an error and body callback. Okay, good to know. So we can essentially recreate this using actually ES6 import syntax because that's what we have available on our templates. So with this in mind, I'm going to leave these tabs open for now, and I'm going to bring up my code editor where I have just the basic bare bones React, Express, TypeScript template that you had in the previous labs. I didn't edit much of anything. It still just says hello world on the home page and nothing really more than that, and it still has that one basic route. I'm trying to show that you don't have to have anything special set up and no special architecture of your folders or no utilities or anything installed like that. At a minimum, what you're going to have to do is at least install the packages to get this up and running. So I'm going to cancel running my server here, and I'm going to clear my terminal. And the next thing I'm going to do is, once it decides to work with me here, there it goes, buddy. We need to install both the Mailgun JS package that was demoed in their documentation, which they have more information about if you're curious about it. And we're also going to have to make sure we have our types defined. That way we can actually have access to our safe typing via TypeScript. So while these install, they both have node package pages that you can go check out to get some more information on how to utilize them. So with that up and running, I'm going to go ahead and do an npm run dev again, and I'll move my terminal out of the way. Cool. I'll wait for Webpack to watch the files. Very good, all fine and dandy. I'm going to move that out of the way and double check my website to make sure she's still running. Okay, good. We seem to be in order here. So this video will actually be just worried about connecting it to your backend, and I'll have a separate video of how to make a contact form and make a post request to your server that will actually send the email. So we're going to be hard coding some values for today. Now, we can actually do this all in this one file if we want to. That could get kind of clunky, so I'd recommend breaking it into like utility files that you can import a function into that the route runs. But for this demo, I'm just going to code it out all in this file just to show you that there's nothing special that you need to do on your end. All you got to do is code it right, and you got it good to go. So the first thing we need to do is import our Mailgun loader from the Mailgun JS package. Now that we have this imported, we can actually go ahead and configure our Mailgun loader. So just like their documentation, they had the Mailgun with set of parentheses and an object to configure it with. We're going to be doing the same thing. And we're going to store that configured reference into a variable we can use later. So I'm going to say let Mailgun equal Mailgun loader here. And remember, it took a set of parentheses and a configuration object that we need to fill in. And the first argument, if you look at the documentation, and because we're using TypeScript here and typings, we already have IntelliSense giving us a great hand here telling us what the property names might be, so we don't have to sit here and guess or Alt-Tab between this and the documentation. So API key is one of the ones we want, and I'm actually going to go and paste my API key back from my Mailgun settings here. So I'm going to paste this guy in for API key. And if we remember, it was indeed a string value that the documentation had as their example. So that's why I'm going to be putting it in the string quotes. And then the other one was going to be our domain, which again, I will copy from right here. That's our sandbox, like our playground testing domain, where we as developers can goof off and make sure we have everything hooked up correctly. So with that in play, we should be configured and good to go. I have no errors in my terminal. Everything seems to be going well so far. So with our configuration done, let's go ahead and set up that data object. Now, instead of just having the data object like they did in their example, I'm going to move out the creation of this guy into some other function so we can maybe utilize it later again in our program if we have to. So I'm going to make actually I'm going to do it below the registration. There we go, just so I can keep the route and then the hello world route and my contact route separate. So I'm going to make a new function called send email. And it is going to go ahead and create that data object just like it did in the example. So we're going to have to call send email with a couple of arguments. So we're going to have this is going to be coming from their documentation, again, where they have from to subject and text. And you can actually have text or this property called content right here. I don't know if it's on this particular page where they show off what you can do. Of course not. I was hoping it'd be here. I think there was API reference, where we can have, let's see. Yeah, so these are all the parameters that you can accept in your data object, the thing we're creating here right now. And you can see there's going to be a text, or we can even do an HTML if you wanted to for our content. So we can actually send HTML content via email. I'm going to keep this demo simple and just stick to text as what we need here. So going back to where I was a second ago and checking out their example, I'm going to be using this text property rather than the HTML property because I'm sending just a basic test string. So I don't really need the HTML property available for this email. So back to our code editor to keep going here. So again, we had 2. And because we're using TypeScript, I'm just going to go ahead and lazily define all these in line like so, because honestly, they're all just going to be basic strings, unless I hit enter on the wrong button. There we go. We have 2, a from, we needed a subject, which is also a string, and then believe it or not, a content, which is also a string. All right. So this data object we're going to be configuring with Mailgun here. Remember, they needed the same name properties as to, from, subject, and either text or content. We're calling it content. That way we can actually scale this up to be HTML or text if you wanted it to be. Or if we were lazy, we could also call this text and call it a day. But we're going to leave it as content for now. Using some ES6 shorthand syntax, if the property of this object is the same as the value I'm assigning it, we can actually shorthand it down to just the word to instead of 2:2. Same thing for from, form, something for subject. And then because we're going to be choosing the text property, we're going to be putting in content there for our data object. So with that being constructed now, we can utilize exactly what we had down here in their example, where they do the Mailgun configuration, .messages method, .send, and send off that data. So we're going to go ahead and return from the send email function a Mailgun .messages, and there's IntelliSense giving us a hand again, .send, check it out, it's so useful. And then it will send just our data, and that's it. And this guy actually sends a promise. So when we call this particular function, we can use it. It has to be asynchronously done. It doesn't happen right away. We have to connect to their API and send the email through their API, and that happens in a non-zero amount of time. So with the email function ready to go, all we have to do is incorporate it into some kind of route on our Express server. Now it's going to be a post route because we're going to need access to a rec.body, a request body of information eventually. In this particular demo, all it's going to be doing is just hardwiring an email to send, and we're going to test it from Postman. So let's get started. It's going to be on the routes API / contact. We can call it whatever we want. And then we have to just wire up our route as usual. Okay, and because we're good little coders, we're going to go ahead and wrap everything in a catch and try block, or try catch block, just to make sure that we can catch an error if it inevitably happens, as I'm sure I've typoed something or I've forgotten some key steps somewhere. But again, the trick is not to panic. Just read your errors, look at the documentation, and try and find out where you messed up. Because let's face it, we all constantly messed up. I've been programming at this video for about a year now, and I still mess up the most basic things sometimes and wonder how I've gotten this far as a developer. All right, so like I said earlier, because this is an asynchronous function, we're going to need our async keyword on our callback there. And then we have access now to this await keyword that will allow promises to resolve before it moves on. So we're going to await our send email function that requires a to. Now this to in this instance will have to be hard-coded to your authorized recipient email. So in my case, it's going to be my email. And in your case, it'd be your authorized email. So to my personal email. The next string was going to be our from, and we're going to say this is going to be from something like, it has to be an email address now, so that's where it has to be from. So we're going to say something like, we'll call it no reply at test.com, something that, you know, is whatever. Then we need a subject of some kind, and we can say, I don't know, hello there, right? And then our content, or our message can be, may the force be with you. Yo, you. Cool. And that will be our send email function. And let's go ahead and give ourselves a response to send when it's sent. So when that hopefully resolves correctly with no errors, we should get a response in Postman that says email sent. And believe it or not, that's about it. I remember spending agonizingly long amounts of time trying to figure this out back when I was a student at Covalence, and then helping explain this down and distill this information down to this simple stuff right here is great. And the fact we have TypeScript with IntelliSense now helping us finish out these methods and configurations, it makes our lives way easier. All right, so my server is listening on port 3000. There's no errors. I don't know how that happened, but that's okay. I'm going to open up my Postman, and more than likely my Postman will have my test from earlier, so I might not have to code too much on it. Okay, cool. It's going to be a post request to Indeed localhost 3000 API contact. Y'all can see where I was testing this earlier to make sure I didn't make a complete fool of myself while recording this video. I did have a rec.body.message earlier, and you know what? We can actually go back and refactor that to work that way. So instead of hard coding this may the force be with you, let's actually have it be part of our Postman test, just to make sure everything's integrated correctly. So I'm going to change this hard-coded may the force be with you to our rec.body.message. But as of right now, if we try to run this code, we will actually get a problem. So we have to make sure that on our server.ts that we use the express.static middleware, express.static, my apologies, express.json middleware that will help us allow to parse JSON bodies. This is a requirement in order to access that rec.body on our routes. So with that little refactor, it looks like it's booted up and running again on localhost 3000, and I'm going to try and attempt to make this request. I got a positive confirmation message that says the email has been sent, and it probably got sent to my spam folder on my phone here, so let me check it out. Yeah, and right there, I don't know if you can see that, but I have a no reply, may the force be with you, with a subject that says hello there. Like I said, if it fades into view or not. So we successfully just sent ourselves an email via our code, and that's awesome. And honestly, that about concludes the backend implementation of Mailgun.js, along with the TypeScript typings for it, which didn't really require a whole lot of work. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it can get kind of clunky if you had several different APIs you're connecting to with these routes. So sometimes folks like to move these functions into like a utilities folder. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these right here and cut them. And I'm going to paste it into my utilities folder. I'm going to make a new one called something like mailgun.ts. I'm going to paste that code in there. Let's not forget our Mailgun loader. Otherwise, we're going to have some problems. Boom. And then don't forget, we're going to have to export this send email function out of this file. So we're going to do a export like that. That should be set up and ready to go. Now in here, we're going to have to import this function. So we're going to do an import from this directory /utilities/mailgun.ts. Import that send email function, and the underline goes away. My error goes away in my terminal, and it looks like we are about ready to go. So I'm just going to send myself a slightly different email message. Maybe I'll put some exclamation points on it just to make sure that my inbox reflects that correctly, to make sure our little refactor to clean up our code makes sense and it's all wired up and running correctly. May the force be with you, and we're just really excited about it this time. So fingers crossed, hitting send. Email sent. And we got it. May the force be with you is the second email with plenty of exclamation points, so we know, and there's the actual preview for it as well. We got it up and running and working, and that is it. You have successfully integrated the Mailgun third-party API into your Node Express server. And stay tuned, because in the next video, I'll show you how we can quickly make a form on your front-end React components in order to make a post request to this very same route. So if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below or the questions below this video, and I'll be happy to help answer them. Great job.